I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, y'all? Welcome to episode 96 of the Speak on Peace podcast. As always, I'm your gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that this episode reaches you all in good health, that you're taking care of yourself and your loved ones, taking care of your mentals and your physicals and all that good stuff. Before we do get into everything, happy Juneteenth. This is going to be a short episode. It's going to be surrounding Juneteenth, the commemoration of Juneteenth, the celebration of Juneteenth, and all that good stuff. I'm never going to, bypass the opportunity to speak about Juneteenth on this here platform. With all that being said, thank you all for tuning in to the Speak on Peace podcast, whether it's your first time, second time, third time, whatever the frequency may be. Thank you for tuning in. I cannot stress how important, how grateful I am for your listenership. For my YouTube viewers, was good. Thank you all for tuning in. We're building up that community. I definitely appreciate you all for continuing to watch. I know switching platform, especially, as far as we came and then finally implemented the YouTube. It's a hard thing to break habits. And I know a lot of you all habits have been listening to this podcast on whatever platform you decide to listen on. So to my YouTube viewership, thank you all for tuning in. We're going to continue to build this community. We're going to continue to build that platform to get it up to speed with the remaining platforms. But I definitely appreciate it. With all that being said, I guess let's get into it. So as you all may know, since the beginning of this podcast, I believe it was like episode 4 or 5. It may have been like 4. I've spoken about the holiday of Juneteenth and the history of Juneteenth and, what I decided to do to commemorate it. In the past and previous years, I've always known about the history of the holiday Juneteenth. I haven't always celebrated, but I've always been aware of it. I think last year was my first time actually thinking, okay, this holiday is here. Let me do something to commemorate it. I think that last year, 2020, was the first year of many years going forward to where I'm going to make sure that I acknowledge and commemorate it and do certain things to make sure that I just am grateful of the holiday. For those of you who don't know, listen to this podcast, you don't know what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth is a holiday that commemorates, quote unquote, the freedom of enslaved men and women and children in this country, where people were set free. We all know that slavery didn't exactly end with the Emancipation Proclamation, but that is when it was supposed to have ended, I should say. But this day marks when the majority of enslaved people in this country actually became freed men, whatever that means. We know the history that ensued following this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the history of this and acknowledge the history of this holiday and acknowledge the magnitude of this holiday, because it's definitely important. The famous saying or the cliche saying is, you can't get to where you're going without knowing where you have been. And part of knowing where you have been is knowing what your family have come from, knowing what your ancestors have come from, and knowing what they have surpassed and knowing what they have overcome in order to get you to where you are. When I think about things, well, first of all, I should also mention that today, United States government, I think I'm going to speak about this later in the episode, so we're going to get it later on. But getting back into just like the commemoration and not knowing where you're going, I always say that, fighting a good fight and fighting the fight for equality and fighting the fight for justice and things like that, we are not going to see the fruits of that labor. We're putting in the work, but we are not going to see a world to where it's either equal, to where all human beings are equal, or at least close to being equal. But the work that we're putting in now, the bills we getting passed, the bills we getting brought to legislation, the things we're fighting for as reparations, the things we're fighting against as far as like social justice, for social justice causes, fighting against oppression, fighting against racism, fighting against racial inequality, and all these things. We're putting in the work now, but we're actually not going to be able to reap the benefits of that. That's going to be something people generations and generations down are going to be able to reap the benefits from. What I think about that, and the truest form I think about that, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand. We think about Juneteenth. It also brings to mind what I was just talking about a couple episodes ago with the downfall of Black Wall Street, or the massacre of Black Wall Street. A couple weeks ago, I was watching excerpt from a hearing they were having with the government, because the descendants of the people who were slain in the Black Wall Street massacre are fighting for reparations. And one of the key testimonies in this hearing that I was watching was a survivor of this day. This woman was 107 years old, and here she is in front of legislation, stating her recount of what that day looked like, for the sake of fighting for reparations. That is a perfect personification of what I mean by this is something that we are not going to reap the benefits from. This woman is 107 years old. There are so many generations that can be established within 107 years on this earth. I think about, I'm taking personal. I think about my grandma. I'm not going to disclose her age, but I think about how old my grandma is when my grandma is not the age of that woman. And I think about the generations that my grandma has at the age that she has. And she has, she's a great grandmother now. And I think that, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time she reached the age that that woman is, that she will probably be a great-great-grandmother. Just going at the rate that we're going, in the way that childbirth happens and things like that. But I'll say all that to say that it's not far-fetched to put in work for something to occur later down the line. Like, that woman is not seeking any benefit. She didn't get, any reparations from her family, losing their homes and losing their possessions, losing their jobs, losing their assets, and all these things that they lost in this massacre. She's not receiving that, but here she is on the front line fighting for that, so that, maybe her great-grandkids or great-great-grandkids are able to reap the benefits of that. And it's even saying the word benefits is very tricky, because it's like, look at the price that they pay in order to get these. But I say all that to say that this is what we got to keep in mind as we fight for things. Juneteenth, how I decide to commemorate it, and I think most people should decide to commemorate it. And I apologize, I'm speaking pretty fast. I'm going to slow down. How I think other people should decide to commemorate it is, for one, I say solely spend your money in Black communities. If you're not going to solely spend your money in Black communities for this weekend, from Friday to Sunday, or just Saturday, the actual day of Juneteenth, at least spend a majority of your money. Spend a majority of your time, spend a majority of your resources towards people that, not even just people that look like you, towards Black people in the Black communities. Because it's important in sustaining our communities, and it's important in sustaining the wealth and establishing and bringing resources to our communities. Think about, again, going back to Black Wall Street. The only reason why that community was so self-sustainable is because they kept the dollar within each other. They spent the dollars with their neighbors. They spent the dollars with their family. They spent the dollars with, someone they may have, their schoolmates. They spent the dollars with their coworkers and things like that. Because that money stayed within that 35 block radius, it was able to stay sustained, because there wasn't an outflow of cash. There was only an inflow. Whatever money they were making, maybe they were working downtown, maybe they were working in another state, wherever the case may be, where they were spending that money, which was new money being brought into community, it was staying there in their community. And we have to realize that. I don't know if we ever going to get back to that. I don't know if we're ever going to see that. I spoke about it in episode 92 about how it's possible with the resources that we have today. It's possible to recreate Black Wall Street times 1,000 right now, because of the resources that are available, and we live in a digital information, and we live in a digital age, and there's so much information that's accessible to us. It's at our fingertips. So definitely possible, but the fact that we go away from, doing such things and go away from spending money with each other, it's hard to accomplish that. So that's one thing that's one way I decide to celebrate Juneteenth, is make sure that the money I spend for either that weekend or the money I spend that day is either in the community, like the community I grew up in, or the money is spent with business owners that look like me or that look like my family. Because it's just important, it's definitely hard out here to run a business, and it's extremely hard for people of color to run a business because they have to rely on their community, and we are so the way that capitalism works, we are so it's so ingrained in our heads, and we are so used to spending money at these large chains, at the McDonald's and the Burger Kings, and spending our money with Nike, and spending money in Target, and spending money in Walmart and things like that. We are so used to doing this that it's hard for us to branch out and go somewhere else and spend that money. A lot of these chains, there are some opportunities to where some of these chains, yes, the entire chain may be owned by a person who don't look like us. Y'all know what I mean when I say that. But that franchise may be owned by a black person. Like where I went last year, how I celebrated last year was, for one, I spent my money in a black community, but I also cooked the traditional dish. And where I got my groceries from was from one of those chains where I don't know who the owner is of the actual chain, but that franchise was in the neighborhood I grew up in, and it was owned by a black woman. So I felt relieved in knowing that I spent my money for that day, even though I don't live in that community. I spent my money in that community. We got to help to build ourselves up. We don't get the handouts that the other communities get. We don't get the resources the other community get. A lot of these things are not afforded to us. That's why the communities we grew up in look the way they look. And so the only way we can continue to help these businesses thrive and to help these businesses stay alive is we have to bring some type of cash flow into there. And it's not the only way to commemorate or only way to celebrate Juneteenth is not only spending money. You can do things of service, and there's so many different other ways to do that, but that's just how I chose to celebrate it last year, and it's probably how I'm going to choose to celebrate it this year. But it just brought me back, and it brings everything to full circle, especially with the idea of Black Wall Street and that Black Wall Street massacre being brought to the forefront again. It definitely, brings everything full circle and let me connect those dots with understanding how that was able to be accomplished and how we can get back into doing something like that or recreating something like that. Even in just for a weekend, it would do wonders for us. And speaking on even the self-sustaining and the reliance on it, we have to continue to tell our stories. I spoke about this in episode 92 as well. We can't rely on other people to tell our stories. We can't rely on other people to tell our history, because time and time again, they will fail us, and time again, we will be omitted. And so we can't rely upon them. I see a lot of people were mad when the story of Black Wall Street massacre was being brought to the forefront for the first time. Not for the first time, but really at a higher level than it ever had been in the past 100 years. And a lot of people were angry, but it's like this information was always readily available. Yes, they're not going to tell the story to us in a school curriculum, but our parents, our guardians, our grandparents, they have to tell us, they have to pass down these stories so that we understand what we have been through, so we have to understand where our people came from. I think about the same thing with Juneteenth. A lot of people didn't actually know what Juneteenth was. And that's a large reason why people don't celebrate it, because they don't understand the history behind it. And so the reason why I bring that up, the topic I was going to speak about earlier that I said I'm going to wait for it now, is Juneteenth was officially passed as a federal holiday today by the presidential office. And this is the first time in 400 years that this, not 400, 200 plus years, that this holiday is now recognized as a federal holiday. And a lot of people are mad because it's like, America will, give us a federal holiday or give us a day off, but, they won't express, they won't admit to their wrongdoings in terms of slavery. They won't address systematic oppression. They won't address racism. All of that is true. And I totally understand where everybody's coming from, and I don't want to dismiss any of that. The reason why I'm happy that it was brought, and the reason why I'm happy that it's a federal holiday now, is because now we are more aware of something. Now, when our kid, who's probably been in the school system for 2 or 3 years, is suddenly getting his day off, now this kid wants to ask questions, and now here's our opportunity to teach this child. Again, we can't rely on these school curriculums. We can't rely on these teachers who don't look like us, care about us, or empathize for us to tell our stories, because time and time again, they will fail us. They will fail our children. And so we have to educate ourselves in order to pass on this information. The more knowledge that we have, the better off these children will be. This goes on back into the topic I was speaking about in the beginning. The fights that we are fighting, it's going to affect generations and generations and generations beyond us. And so we have to understand that and be selfless in that fight, and understand that in the information that we pass on. We teach our kids about Juneteenth, and they teach theirs, and so on and so on. And here's a holiday that's never going to be missed in our families because of the knowledge that we possess and the knowledge that we passed on to generations and generations. I want you all to think about that as you are celebrating, whether you decide to celebrate on Friday or Saturday. I believe it will be recognized on Friday federally, just because of the sake of holidays and holidays and work and employees and things like that. But it's officially recognized. It's observed on June 19th. Or no, it's observed on a Friday. That Friday, which is the third Friday of June, I believe. But Juneteenth is actually June 19th, if that makes sense for any of you all. So whether you decide to celebrate this year on Friday or Saturday, just think of all that. Think about the history. Think about the knowledge you can pass on. Think about where you spend your money those days. Think about what you decide to do for those days. It all affects generations down the line. And we had to be cognizant of that. And it's very important that we're cognizant of that and that we are aware of that. So for my people, man, please, please, please recognize it. Please commemorate. Please celebrate Juneteenth. Let's continue to tell our own stories, because we can't rely on people who don't look like us, care about us, care for us, to tell our stories. Because there will be huge chunks missing. There will either be huge chunks of the story missing. There will either be lies told, or, as we've seen with the Tulsa Massacre, it won't be told at all. And so we can't rely on that. We can't rely on the school curriculum. We can't rely on these teachers. We can't rely on school districts. We can't rely on anyone but ourselves. Let's educate ourselves, and let's tell the story the right way. And again, I said this episode was going to be short, and I promise you all, and I'm going to deliver on that promise. So that's all I have for this week. One thing I want to tell you all, and I know this is like, it's not an oxymoron. What is the word I'm looking for? It's not an oxymoron. I don't know why I can't think of the word. But anyways, AMC is commemorating Juneteenth by showing a couple of prominent Black movies during this day. So the 7 films that are going to be included in AMC is going to be Do the Right Thing, Harriet, The Waterman, Fences, Moonlight, Barbershop, and Love and Basketball. Me, someone who loves to watch movies, I'm excited about that. I don't know if I'm actually going to go see them, but that is contributing to Black directors and Black filmmakers and Black storytellers, and it helps them continue to tell these stories. But the reason why I bring that up, because it's definitely exciting. Like, Do the Right Thing, Love and Basketball are classic. A lot of those movies are classic movies, but I'm thinking about those 2 movies being classics, and I never had the opportunity to see them. And a lot of you all who are around my age never had the opportunity to see them in the movie theater either. So I think the opportunity to be able to commemorate that day by watching those movies in the movie theater is definitely exciting. Like, I've never seen Do the Right Thing on the big screen TV, and I've seen it 1,000 times. I've never seen Love and Basketball on such a huge screen, man, and I've seen it 1,000 times. So I think the opportunity is definitely great. Once again, that's all I have for this week. Thank you all for tuning in to Speak on Peace podcast. Make sure you are liking, rating, and or subscribe. No, make sure you are subscribing and or liking and rating the podcast. I can't stress enough how important that is. Please, please, please leave me feedback. I appreciate it. If you're not following me on social media, please follow me on IG at Speak My Peace Pod. Once again, my IG handle is Speak My Peace Pod. That is the only social media handle at the time. But you know, I do update and provide updates there as well as share stories that I may cover in a podcast or I may forget to cover in a podcast. Once again, my IG handle is Speak My Peace Pod. That's a Speak My Peace podcast for this week. I'm out.